Okay, let's go ahead and get started. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Nick Wolf. I'm the Director of Career Services for the Maine School of Business. As well, I'm a professor in the traditional undergrad as well as the BBA and the MBA programs. And so I was really excited when I was asked to moderate this discussion on sports marketing. We have an amazing guest speaker today who's given up his time to come enlighten us a little bit about the industry and about his role. And so would love to introduce right now Greg Schwartz. He's actually currently the Director of Corporate Partnerships for the San Jose Sharks. Prior to that, he was the Director of Sales for National Sales for Ironman, and he actually still currently has his own company called Pennant Agency, which is a sports and marketing agency. And so really wanted to thank Greg for taking his time before he heads up to San Francisco heads up to San Jose for their next game. And so thanks, Greg, for coming in. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and just jump right into it. I've got some questions that I've come up with, along with some questions that you all came up with in the discussion. And so we're going to go through that. Feel free, though, if you'd like to, if you have questions, if you think of something, feel free to either type it into the chat, and I'll ask those questions as well, or you can also just raise your hand or chime in and ask questions, and I'll make sure I take some breaks to where give you an opportunity to ask questions. So great. Let's just go ahead and get started. Why don't you walk us through just a little bit of your career, maybe even starting with you kind of starting your own company, or maybe starting or completing the MBA. What did that look like?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I originally started undergrad at Point Loma. Didn't graduate from Point Loma, graduated from Oregon State, but started undergrad. And then when I moved back to San Diego, or came back down, definitely knew I wanted to get my MBA, and Point Loma was kind of one of the first places I wanted to look. And so did that from 2012 to 2014, the evening program, and did that while I was working for, at the time, the Padres. And following that, actually went to San Diego State and Learfield and was the associate GM to help run their sponsorship department within the athletic department at SDSU. After that, got out of sports for a little while, and then got into Ironman and absolutely loved it. Fell in love with the sport, fell in love with endurance training. And then the pandemic hit, and mass participation was hit very hard due to the pandemic. And unfortunately they had to make some cuts from a sales perspective. And I was let go in July of 2020. And thought, what's the best idea you can have in a global pandemic is, why not start your own agency? And so thought about it for a couple of weeks, honestly, and talked to some mentors in the space, and just said, let's do it and dive in. And it was a great decision, because it allowed me to learn. I learned more in that 1 year than I probably learned in the 5 years prior of working for specific companies, just in terms of how to run a business and P&L, and really understanding what it takes to succeed within having your own company. And it was probably one of the best decisions I've made so far. And then the Sharks came calling around summertime of this year, and we started those conversations, and it just felt like the right opportunity to come in and make an impact right away within the team, within the club, and more specifically within the sponsorship department. as I was really excited about what they were doing.
Mm. So tell me about what a director of corporate partners, or what does that look like? That director of corporate partnerships.
Yeah,
Can you walk us through a day in the
of
life
course.
or day to
Yeah.
day what you
So
do?
my role, the director of corporate partnerships. So I oversee all new business and renewals or retention of our corporate partners. So you go to a Sharks game, or for example, in San Diego, you go to a Padre game and you see all the different corporate advertising. That's the department that I head up. So working with companies on their sports marketing initiatives, on how any of their just overarching marketing initiatives can be enhanced through sports marketing, can be enhanced through a partnership, in this case with the San Jose Sharks. And then really taking it one step further as to, it's not just a marketing partnership, but how can we impact their business through our other corporate partners, through networking, through different opportunities that we may have to integrate into their business. So day to day is a lot of new business selling and working with our new business team on finding new corporate partnerships, new corporate partners, as well as working with the retention team, the renewal team on our current partners and different activations that they have going on, different campaigns they're working on. And then at the end of the year, renewing some of them as well to continue to be a partner with us.
Yeah. Is that, I'm assuming that's a pretty cyclical, I don't know, you haven't been in the role for a long period of time, but I can imagine it's a very cyclical uh, business model where best times you get a lot of easy corporate partnerships, not great times, or do they seem to stay? I guess I could be wrong, but do they seem to stay maybe longer, or just because maybe they're fans or they're tied to the city?
Yeah, I mean, we have partners with the Sharks who have been partners for 10, 15
Wow.
plus years.
Wow.
We also have partners who maybe San Jose is a key market for them for a couple of years, and then those markets change, key markets change for what they're looking to accomplish if they're a larger national company. And so they may look to go spend those marketing dollars elsewhere, rather than with the Sharks or rather than with the San Jose based team. And then from a timing perspective, yeah, I mean, it's very cyclical in that right now we've already turned the page to start selling or try to start selling for the 22-23 season.
Wow.
So kind of once that season starts, we have some last minute deals we try to close out. But then we really turn the page and want to focus on next year and get a jump on next year, because now is when Q4 of a normal calendar year is when a lot of these companies are finalizing their budgets, and we want to make sure that we can be included within those budget cycles, and that those marketing dollars that may be earmarked for partnerships, maybe earmarked for a San Jose region or a Bay Area region, that we're getting in front of those companies early enough before those marketing dollars are already allocated to someone else.
I wanted to just ask really quick. I'm just trying to familiarize myself with this role as well. So, are you selling when you sell to a corporate sponsor? Is it are you also potentially selling them for the local TV advertisement, or is it strictly arena?
Yep. Yeah. So our TV rights are with NBC Sports in the Bay Area. And so they own those rights to sell ad space commercials into that. But we have TV visible signage, our dasher boards, for example, when you're watching one of our games, the static signs that are all the way around, those are some of those are TV visible. So we can and do include, we do have those opportunities to sell that TV visible signage. Yeah. Okay. But from a ad unit perspective, 30-second commercials, et cetera, that's with NBC Sports mainly.
Okay. Now you said that the Sharks just called on you. Can you walk us through how that happened?
Yeah. So they
lined up with them.
Yeah. So they actually used a recruiting company that specializes in sports roles. who I have a previous relationship with. I've known this company for a while. They actually recruited me for the job at Ironman as well. So
Oh, wow.
I've been able to build a relationship with this recruiting agency and their president. And so when the Sharks were recruiting for this director role, they hired this agency to help with that search. And so then he reached out and went through the process with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was how was that? Pretty easy process. I'm assuming it's a very rigorous interview process.
Yeah, it was. So it was first like phone screen interview with the recruiter just to make sure that we're aligned on expectations on what I was looking for in the role to make sure it was a good fit before passing along to the club. And then there were 2 sets of Zoom interviews over the course of probably about 2 weeks to get through those first 2 Zoom interviews. And then following that, they flew me up to San Jose for an in-person interview with a couple different VPs and the president of the team. And I had to put a presentation together. I don't know if we have any hockey fans here, but
No.
22-23. So next season, the NHL announced that we're able to sell jersey patch. So if you watch NBA, you see that there's a jersey patch on theirs. On their team jerseys. So we have that opportunity beginning next season. And that's a big asset for us. That's a key piece of inventory. So that was part of the presentation was my go-to-market strategy for selling this jersey patch for next season.
Just like NASCAR. Everybody's getting on the NASCAR.
Right, luckily not at that level. That's for sure. That's for sure. So
yeah, you're not gonna have M&Ms or nothing
right.
like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I do have a question based on you getting laid off with Ironman. Did that sour you at all? Did that because I know it's a really niche kind of market to be in that type of role. Did that question whether you wanted to stay in it or were you pretty resolute about staying within the industry even after that?
It didn't sour me too much. I mean, I understood it's a business they have to run. We're not putting events on. We weren't putting events on. Everything was getting canceled. And so it's just kind of part of life, you could say. It didn't sour me too much about it. They did it like Ironman's a great company. They were able to make sure that we were taken care of in the process and not just hung out to dry per se. So they were great throughout that process. Was I interested in staying in endurance? To some extent, I did when I started my agency. I was working with LA Marathon. I was working with IMG and Escape from Alcatraz, which is another triathlon. So I was able to stay in endurance, but it's a very small industry within the larger kind of sports industry. So there aren't nearly as many opportunities. So really what I was looking for was just finding a way to stay in the space and build a brand and grow as a person, grow not just through my experiences from a business perspective, but just from a personal perspective as well. And I feel that I really accomplished a lot in that year of having my own agency outside of the kind of business accolades that you could put around it. Just personally, what I learned about myself was invaluable compared to what kind of I've learned about myself in previous roles. So
awesome.
Yeah.
I want to give anybody, if anybody has a quick question,
Yeah.
I want to give you all a chance to ask one if you have one that based on what we've already talked about. Perfect. And again, if you want, you can type into the chat if you do have a question. I'm more than happy to ask that as well. So let's talk about just the industry in general and maybe for some aspiring sports marketing individuals, what do you think the best entry point is, or what's the best? I guess if you're thinking about starting a career in sports marketing, and you're either graduating undergrad or you're graduating from a master's program, what's the best way to start that?
Yeah, of course. I think it differs if we're talking out of an undergrad versus a master's program. But to some extent, if we're talking daytime MBA where it's right out of college, jump into MBA versus kind of evening MBA where it could be you could have the job experience, et cetera. I interned in college for the Portland Trailblazers.
Ah,
And so that's kind of how I got my start, was unpaid internship, and just working the summer in their business affairs office, and just connecting with as many people as I could. And during that last year of college, then, because that was my going into my senior year of undergrad, during that year, it was connecting with as many people as I could in the sports space, and just kind of getting to know everyone, understanding what area I wanted to get into within sports, just because you have the operation side, you have the sales side, you have then within sales, you have tickets, you have sponsorship, marketing side. And then from there, as we got close to graduating, it was, all right, how am I going to find an internship? I actually, out of college, had a full-time job offer to stay in Portland, Oregon, where I'm from. But I also had a internship opportunity to come down to San Diego, work in the athletic department at SDSU as an intern, and thought, you know what, it's like it's not easy to break into sports, and getting your foot in the door any way you can is something that I really wanted to do. And so I took that internship and just grew it from there, and networked as much as I could, and actually like learned how to selling local radio here in San Diego before I got my first sponsorship job in sports, and went about it that way. So I think for as big as the sports industry is, it's a very small industry as well from a networking perspective. And it's really just beginning to network as early as you can, and get to know as many different people within as many different organizations and as many different departments as you can, to understand what you're looking for and what really excites you within the industry.
yeah. So it sounds like you had to sacrifice a little more than. I'm really surprised the Trailblazers didn't pay you. I mean, they just got
Hey, it's there. I mean, yeah, it was 100% worth it. That's for sure. Like I wouldn't change anything when it comes to the internships and how I got into sports, for sure.
Okay. So Curtis actually had a question. He says, I'm a physicist getting my MBA. Is there an analyst role or a role that may utilize a scientific background with my
Yep.
new leadership skill set in MBA? What would that look like? So somebody coming straight out of more of a science type of a background.
No, it's a great question. So we have at the Sharks and at the majority of other places I've worked, we have an analytics department. So we have a department solely for if it's marketing analytics, if it's sponsorship analytics, and really doing all of that kind of background work on why the Sharks. Like, we have a business analyst role on our revenue and brand team, where he helps with category analysis. He helps with revenue analysis within these categories. He helps go out and do all the research on, okay, we have a specific partner in let's call it the grocery category. Why do they make sense for the Sharks? What ties their audience to our audience, and helps us tell that story authentically. So we have sports from that perspective, has that type of an analyst role. The other side of it is the actual analytics side of hockey or baseball or basketball, of getting on the operations side, on that team side of analyzing statistics, analyzing performance, et cetera. So I think there are a lot of opportunities within the sports industry, having that kind of science and math background, to still find a niche and make an impact, and enjoy what you're doing, for sure.
Awesome. Thanks. And Curtis, thanks for the question. That's a great question. I want to jump into COVID here in a second, but I do want to ask, and you and I talked about this. It seems like an extremely glamorous, industry, glamorous, organization, uh, job. I'm assuming it's not all glamour. There's some hard work that's involved in this, correct?
Oh yeah, there's lots of hard work. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I mean it's fun. I love it. It's a lot of fun. Um it can be glamorous at times. I mean, getting to be behind the scenes at a hockey game or a baseball game or a basketball game is a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work. And what a lot of people don't see is what goes into it from 9 to 5, and really they only see the game and what happens at 7:30 on during the game, and not really what happens prior to that and getting ready for it, and the buildup and the prep over the year to prepare for the season. So yeah, there's some glamorous parts to it, but it's a lot of hard work, a lot of long hours being in the office, and then going straight from the office to a game, and getting up and doing it all over again the next day. So yeah, there's a lot of fun, but it's definitely a lot of hard work.
Now let me ask you, if they won a Stanley Cup, would you be eligible as a staff member to receive a championship ring? Do they even give rings in the NHL?
So that's the team would have, yeah, they would most likely do that. I would hope. And yeah, that would be something
Okay,
that
I'm
I
just
would
wondering.
hope that I would get one. Yeah, right. Yeah.
I would think, like, who doesn't, you should,
Yeah.
keep people should get it. I have another actually question from actually a couple of questions. So
Yeah, I
I'll
can
throw
see
these
him.
out there.
I brought the chat up so I can see him as
Oh,
well.
perfect.
Yeah.
So do you want to answer Alex's first? So
Yeah.
Alex asks, what job titles do you typically reach out at brands you're looking to have sponsor?
Yep. So we really look for a decision maker on the marketing side. So starting with a CMO, a VP of marketing, a VP of brand, are where we really want to start. We want to go as high as we can to that decision maker, just knowing that they're going to be the one that has final say in this partnership. What we also like to do, and there's a lot of ways we can do this, is do research on the company and do research on the people in those roles, and find out, like, are they a Sharks fan? Or what I used to do with Ironman a lot is, are they in, like, there are Ironman triathlon groups on LinkedIn, so I could go prospect on LinkedIn who is in this Ironman triathlon group and find C-level executives who have completed an Ironman who love endurance. And so there are a lot of ways to prospect those types of roles, but we typically look for a chief marketing officer, VP of marketing, VP of brand as the starting point for those.
Now, do you typically find that companies are reaching out to you? I mean, this is the professional. This is not the Sacramento Mud Cats or
Yeah.
No,
we do have a few every once in a while. Yeah, we get a few that will reach out to us directly. But I would say the majority are outreach that we make, that my sales team makes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Armando had a question. How difficult is it moving through different areas within the sports industry? What made you settle into your area of sports media?
No, great question. It's, from a sales perspective, let's say you were in ticket sales and wanted to move over to sponsorship. That's not hard to do, because you're selling. So you have that innate drive to sell. You have that background, that experience of selling. That can be consistent across, let's call it sponsorship to the marketing department, because you're still in sponsorship. We're building these marketing ideas and these proposals for brands. So we are marketers at heart. So that piece isn't quite as difficult either. Going from, let's call it the sales side to, in this case, the hockey side, that would be pretty difficult, just because not having that hockey background operationally, I'd have to ultimately start at the bottom from that perspective. And what made me settle into my area of sports media? I love to sell. I love to interact. I love to meet with people and network. And sales comes very naturally to me. And so that's really where I gravitated towards when I was looking at different roles and starting my career was gravitating more towards that sales aspect, that marketing aspect of it. Oh, you're on mute, Nick.
Oh, there we go. I just want to say great question, Alex and Armand, and thanks, Greg, for those responses. Let's jump into just how COVID has affected. I mean, you're in San Jose. You're in an indoor activity. They had to cancel the season. 2 years. I keep thinking, oh yeah, COVID was like 2 years ago. So how has it affected how you're selling sponsorships? And I know it's still probably a little difficult, but how has it affected just your overall job, the types of individuals that you're getting to sponsor? Walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah. It's definitely affected it from a sponsorship perspective in terms of how brands are evaluating their current deals, who they're working with, and why they're spending that money there. And I see a lot of brands, and I don't think that's just sports. I think that's marketing in general, is they're reevaluating where they're spending their dollars and why they're spending them in that medium. And I think that's made it even more competitive in terms of why the Sharks in this case, and being able to be a storyteller. I mean, I think one of the things that I've tried to instill in my team is we're not transactional sellers. We're not out there trying to just sell and move on and sell and move on like you would buying a product per se. We really want to be transformational in how we sell. We need to be authentic storytellers and connect with a brand and what they're looking to accomplish to tell that story. It's not so much selling a sign or selling a Facebook post or selling some LED that's all around the arena. It's selling a program, it's selling a partnership, it's selling a story, and working with these brands on what their goals are, what their initiatives are, and building out an authentic story that we can tell with them and that they can tell through the Sharks ultimately. So I think that's been a big part of the learning that we've seen from COVID is we need to be better storytellers. We need to find a way to connect with brands and have those brands connect directly with our fan base. And that's been one of the key pieces. Outside of that, I think brands are very interested in kind of what ifs of this happens again, and what ifs if God forbid, we have to go back to no fans in an arena or what. So I think that's the other piece of it, is brands are very aware now of language in contracts around what happens if basically, if this happens again. So that's the other piece of it, is working with them on that aspect of the partnership as well. So
you've actually had to somewhat change the way you're presenting, or just the contract itself, if something happens. So that's even
I think before COVID, force majeure was it's always been in a contract, but it maybe was something that people knew it was there and didn't look at it super closely because it was pretty consistent. And now I think a lot of these contracts have that's one of the big pieces of like, all right, what does that force majeure language look like now? Because I don't think too many of these contracts had global pandemic force majeure language.
No, probably not.
Yeah, so I think that's another piece of it, is just how what does that look like moving forward? And I think it will be on top of everyone's mind for the foreseeable future, for sure.
Yeah. Let's step away from the Sharks for a second, and
Yeah.
because there's going to be some MBAs who are on here who maybe listen to the recording, who want to better understand maybe starting their own, being an entrepreneur, starting their own organization. Tell us a little bit about Pennant,
Yep.
and then what was that like? Speaking of COVID, maybe difference between starting it then as opposed to maybe what it would have been like to start it in a healthy economy.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It was a whirlwind of a first, let's call it 4 months, 4 to 4.5 months of, because I probably made the decision, excuse me, the middle of August 2020, that this is what I was going to do. I was going to start this agency. And by the beginning of September, had formed a company and hired a lawyer and got all my documents going, and was officially a company in the eyes of the federal government and the state of California. And from there, it was, all right, how am I going to make money, and who am I going to call to have clients as clients? And it was really exciting because every day I woke up knowing whatever I put into it that day, I was going to get out directly. It was going to directly affect my bottom line, basically, as opposed to, and it's not to say that that doesn't happen in my current role, but if I just wasn't having it one afternoon, we're having my own agency, like that directly affected the money that I was bringing in. And so I think it really made me that much more accountable, and I really learned a lot about kind of what you put in is what you get out at the end of the day. And being an entrepreneur is a lot of work, but it's really rewarding when you get that first contract signed. And it's like, I finally got my first client. I saw that first direct deposit go into my account, and I finally got paid. Like, I actually made money doing this with my own agency. And so it's really rewarding. And honestly, like, I've never learned more about the other sides of the business outside of selling, about hiring a lawyer and creating my own contract and all the accounting software that I have, and just all the different aspects that go into starting and running a business. And honestly, like, I look back on my MBA, and not to just like plug the PLNU MBA, because this is what we're talking about right now, but I go back to like my graduate accounting course, and like, man, I'm glad I took that course, because I, like, diving into accounting software, I was a little bit lost at first, but it finally kind of came back to me. And so the 2.5 or 2 years that I spent in the PLNU MBA was definitely shown through with starting my own agency and starting my own business. And I'm not currently, I currently don't have any clients. It currently is still open. I've decided to just kind of keep the agency running in the background, even though I'm not working on anything right now, and I won't work on anything as long as I'm continued to be employed by the Sharks. But I was like, you know what, I'm not gonna shut it down. I'm gonna keep it open just in case. You never know, like 3 years from now, if I want to go back and keep it going and start it up again, whatever that may be. It's just nice to know that I built something and it's still there. And I can see the hard work that I put into it.
Yeah. Appreciate that so much, because it is a lot. It is a lot of work. Another extremely glamorous entrepreneur, right? You're an entrepreneur, extremely glamorous. I appreciate you pointing out that it's so between the Sharks and between Pennant, which one would you say you put more time in? Because everybody thinks, well, I'm going to create my own company, so I have more free time to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
But if you want to be successful, I'm assuming you work pretty hard at it.
I worked very hard at it.
Yeah.
Yes. But honestly, right now, at this moment, being 7 weeks into this job, 8 weeks into this role with the Sharks, It's the Sharks right now,
Yeah.
definitely, because there were times when I had my own agency where it was 3 o'clock and I was like, you know what, I'm going to go for a run right now. Like it's just me and I'm going to do it. And now with the Sharks, it's I have a team and I'm accountable for that team. I'm accountable for that number, and I got a lot. There's a lot going on. I'm in a lot of different things that, and it's great. I love it. Don't get me wrong, but it's definitely long hours right now for sure. Being in season with the Sharks, yeah.
So will that? I mean, I'm assuming. Well, I guess maybe it won't change. Maybe I'm assuming wrong. Does that change at all when you're in the off season, or do you ramp up?
No, because off season is like closing time for us in terms of closing deals and trying to bring in these. Like we start them now. Our sales cycle, it can be as long as 6 to 8 months from when we have a conversation with a partner to when we close that deal, contract is signed, and we start activating. It's a long. It can be a long sales cycle. So yeah.
Would you mind just explaining a little bit about your own company? I know you have it, you're not up and running anymore, but what exactly are you, was it doing, are you doing?
So I was mainly a sponsorship consultant. So a lot of teams have their internal sales departments, have their internal sales teams that are selling sponsorship for them. But one thing I noticed during the pandemic is, because I was one of them, is a lot of sales, that was really one of the areas that was cut significantly due to the pandemic. When cuts were made, unfortunately, I noticed that a lot of those cuts were salespeople. And so what I wanted to do was find a way to help those teams that maybe didn't have that bandwidth because they had to cut one of those roles, they hadn't brought it back yet. From a consultant perspective, I'm a lot less expensive than a full-time employee is, because it's a 3-month contract, 6-month contract, no benefits, none, like it's just that 1099 for the company. And so that's what I really noticed is, let's go out and find some teams and brands that may need help, or not brands, excuse me, properties that may need help selling because their sales bandwidth is lower than where it should be. And I was lucky enough to find a few properties and work with my network. And one of my first client was FC Cincinnati, the MLS team. They opened a brand new stadium in May of this year. And so I started working with them in October of 2020 and helped them sell sponsorship for their new stadium. And it was a great opportunity. And I found like LA Marathon, Escape from Alcatraz, same thing. And so I realized that I could be a consultant, but do the exact same thing that I was doing previously in selling sponsorship, and be effective and be efficient for these companies. Not only from a cost perspective, but also from an hours perspective. And so it worked well, and I really enjoyed it, and worked with some great teams and properties. Yeah.
Awesome. Couple more questions.
Yeah.
So first I'd like to does anybody else have any other questions? If you want to chime in or type those in, I'll get to them. So feel free to ask another question if you have one. So I guess, where do you see, from where you're at now, I'm assuming the director of corporate sponsorships is a pretty senior level role with the Sharks. Where would you see that next, if your entry point is, maybe starting in ticket sales and then maybe moving to promotion, sponsorships, marketing? Where would you see I know you've only been there 7 weeks, but
no, of course. Yeah. I mean, professionally, what I want in myself is to see my next role be a vice president of partnerships. Like that's kind of where I see, and what my goal is as that next role for myself. Now that could be 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road. I'm not really sure yet, because it's to some extent out of my hands per se. But I'm very happy where I am right now. And really enjoy the team, my role, and definitely see a future with this club. And so I'm really excited about that opportunity to continue to grow with the Sharks and continue to build out my team. I'm in the process of hiring right now, and it's definitely a tough market out there in terms of trying to find great talent. We're working through that, but I love my current job, my role, the team that I'm working with, and really excited about the future of it.
So who do you report to?
So we have a vice president who oversees all of sales and service. So he oversees all revenue of ticket sales, premium sales, which constitutes suites, key hospitality areas, and then sponsorship as well. So I report to him.
Okay. And so what would that role look like? What would that role reporting to you, what would that look like in terms of skill set, in terms of experience you'd be looking for?
The role that I'm hiring for?
Yeah,
so I'm hiring for a partnership sales manager role. So what that entails is coming on board as a new business seller. So we have two different roles. We have partnership development and we have partnership sales. And partnership development is client retention. So they work with our current partners, renew our current partners, and then partnership sales is the new business side of it. So hunting, basically, or just being a hunter. And so what I'm looking for is 3 to 5 years sales experience, preferably with a sports team or agency or brand that just loves to sell, loves to hunt. I mean, one of the things I always ask in an interview question, and I'm going through that process right now, is, are you more of a hunter or a farmer? Do you love the ability to go out and prospect and find new companies to call, or are you more of taking your current clients and nurturing them and growing those clients and continuing to build those relationships? Because I think that's a key characteristic of a great salesperson on the new business side is having that drive to always be hunting, always be looking for that next prospect. So that's one of the key things I'm looking for. And then of course, in a sales role, it's very outward facing. So it's being personable, being able to kind of have these conversations, not being afraid to pitch and present in front of large groups to C-level executives. So those are kind of what I'm looking for from that side. And we're actually hiring for both right now. We're hiring for a partnership development role and a partnership sales role. So
awesome. I love that question. Hunter versus farmer. That's such a that's a great question. So last question for you.
Yeah.
Piece of advice that you could give anybody. Again, I have some of my undergrads on this as well, and they are extremely interested in, when I ask them, what do you want to do? I want to go into sports marketing. And so best piece of advice, Greg, that you could give them, or just anybody that's interested in getting into this type of industry, this type of role.
Yeah, for sure. Network. Find, if it's a couple people that are open to connecting with you and having a conversation and learning more about you and networking, and don't be afraid to ask for that next connection. For example, if there's anyone on this call or that may not be on this call, Nick, that is a student, I'm more than happy to take 15 minutes, 20 minutes, learn more about them, tell them what I do, and see if I can make an introduction for them. And don't be afraid to ask for that introduction. That's the key piece of it. Don't be afraid to ask for that introduction. And then follow through, I think, is the next big one. Is you'd be surprised how many people will ask for that introduction and then never follow through and never reach out or never make that connection. And it's a very small industry. So it can be as simple as just network. That's the biggest piece of advice I would say is, if there's a specific league or team or brand that you want to work for, go on LinkedIn and see if you have any connections within someone within that team or brand. If not, do you have a second connection that you can reach out to make an introduction to someone within that brand? Is ask for help, ask for an introduction. I mean, and I'm always open to it. And I know all of my colleagues within the industry are always open to making that introduction, making that network connection. Because honestly, that's how, if you go back and look at my roles with the Padres, with Ironman, with this role, none of them were me going online, filling out the application and getting a call back. It was all, I see a job. Okay, who do I know within that company that I can call and get introduced to that hiring person, reach out to them directly and go about it that route. So I would say, yeah, it's network. It's building your network in the sports industry. If that's really what you want to do, and that's really the industry you want to be in, work on building that network. And like I said, I'm more than happy to help and make an introduction or have a conversation, whatever that may be. So
I appreciate that so much,
yeah.
Greg. And I love the fact that most people think, well, if you're in the NHL, you stay in the NHL. You went from
Not at all.
Padres to,
Yeah.
to Ironman to NHL. You could go to the NBA. You could go to the NFL. There's a
Yeah.
lot of cross, what I'll call pollination between
Yeah.
all the different leagues, right?
I've been in college athletics, Major League Baseball, endurance, and now the NHL. I mean, my boss spent time in the NBA, Major League Baseball, and now the NHL. I mean, yeah, it's very easy to, if you do a great job and you have a great reputation of being a great seller in this case, or whatever that may be in your role, whatever department that is, it's very easy to move around within the different leagues, within the different teams, whatever that may be. Because like I've mentioned, the industry is, even though it's very large, at the same time, it's very small. It's like San Diego. San Diego's a really big city, but I feel like the business network at the same time is very small. So yeah. I see one question from
one
Lisa.
I have right here. Yeah, Lisa, go ahead. So
So
Lisa,
when you're working on contracts and deals, what other functional areas do you collaborate with to cross the finish line? So internally, we work with multiple departments on deals. So from internal perspective, we'll work with, of course, like internal partnership department. So partnership marketing, the activation side of it, making sure what we're selling can actually be activated so that we're not out selling something to a prospect that once the deal is signed, it's turned over to our activation team and they're like, we can't activate it this way. So internally we get sign off from partnership marketing. If we have a community aspect, or in this case, we have a Sharks Foundation, if there's a foundation aspect, we'll work directly with the community relations department, with the foundation, to make sure that we are out selling that piece of it or incorporating that piece of it the right way. And then of course, legal, work with accounting, work with those departments as we get further down the road. But that's one of the great things about the Sharks is they created back in August 2020, revenue and brand is basically all revenue, and the marketing side of it. Because in a lot of organizations, you see a disconnect at times between revenue and marketing, for example. And so what the Sharks did was create revenue and brand, where it's led by our VP of sales and service, who's my boss, and our VP of marketing, who oversees the brand side. And so we are always talking, we are always communicating, we are always ideating on finding ways to make sure that these partnerships are going to be the most successful and we're selling them the right way. When you go outside of that and it's more of an external functional areas, a lot of the time it will be marketing, like I mentioned, is where we start. Depending on the brand, depending on the industry, we do get involved with the sales teams as well. Because if it's, let's say, more of a B2B play, and part of this is the company wanting to network with other Sharks partners, a lot of times the sales team from that company will get involved and we can make introductions to other corporate partners of ours. So those are kind of the main two. And then of course, community relations, sometimes HR, from the external side within that specific company.
Great question, Lisa. I keep muting. Sorry about that. Any other questions? So it sounds like you have an alliance management role that coordinates that interaction, both internal and external. Is that right?
Externally, it's more, honestly, externally, it's probably more the sales side who works directly with all those different departments. And I've been in pitch meetings, we've been in pitch meetings that have all of those departments externally involved: marketing, sales, community relations, depending on what the company wants to market. A lot of the times recently, we've seen a big push to use these assets to market that they're hiring as well. So we'll integrate HR into those conversations. Internally, yes, we do. We put that really on the partnership marketing team. They really are the champions internally on working with all those different departments to ensure we're all aligned and that we're going out to the marketplace in the right way when we're pitching these deals.
Awesome. Any other questions from anybody? It looks like we're good.
Okay. Well, I guess
Greg,
I'll say,
yeah.
I guess before we wrap up, don't hesitate, reach out on LinkedIn if anyone
Appreciate
wants to
that.
connect, has questions, wants to set up a time to just chat through any questions that you would have that maybe you think about after we end this call. More than happy to connect and set up 15 minutes or whatever that may be to talk through everything. Point Loma is very near and dear to my heart, starting undergrad there, finishing grad school there. So I definitely want to help in any way I can.
Appreciate it. And I know specific students that I will make a connection with to you. Great. If that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Feel free. Yeah. LinkedIn will be the best way Perfect. To reach out directly for me. Yeah.
Perfect. Appreciate it so much. Appreciate you, Greg. Everybody, thanks for being on the webinar. And then if you want to reach out to me and you have any questions or want any follow-up questions, feel free and I'll get you connected to Greg. So again, Greg, thanks so much, and we will talk to you later.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. I really appreciate it. Have a good evening.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. Bye.